Hello, I'm Jerry Simmons, commonly known as Doc Rock, here in Haviland, Kansas at Heart of America Science Resource Center and Museum. And I'd like to take the time to share with you some of the key things about when you're out digging in the field and digging dirt and run across bones, or on a vacation, that you run across these items that you're not sure what they are. You know they're bone or maybe fossil, and you'd like to bring them back in. And so I'd like to share with you some techniques here of how to recover them and restore them, do some research on them, and also preserve them so that you could display them to your friends or in your own little museum. And so what do you do with the bones? The first thing that you have to do is you recover them. First thing I'm going to have you focus on in this station one is the picture. And in the background you see some gentlemen, board members of our Heart of America board, who are called in to excavate a tusk, a mammoth tusk. Actually, you can see there's two of them. One of them kind of crossed over them, another one, and they're in the middle of a road, and so the graders have been tearing them up. So it's hard to salvage them and really get them, but we did the best we can. And you can see them using just shovels and other little small tools covered, and then they're going to put it in a plaster jacket, which we have here in the museum. So this took a lot of work, and by the time they had it all plastered up, it was pretty heavy. They had to load it with a tractor loader and then bring it in, and then it takes a lot to work it, and we have that here so you can come see it. Now that's something in the field, and that takes a little more heavy tool stuff to do the digging and excavation of it. Now I drop down to some turtle shells here that I found here not too long ago. They puzzled me as I dug them out. I thought I had a skull of some kind, but it turned out, as you can see, it's the carapace or the shell of a turtle or tortoise. And it's pretty good size. And it's in along with some of the mammoth stuff and things like that. Now, that tool didn't take a lot of tools for that one, but I had to be careful. So now then, what do we need when we go out in the field and we begin to bring in something that's fairly big, like the fellows did with the mammoth tusk? Well, they're going to need boards, because those boards are going to be put in with the bone to help strengthen it when you roll it over and it doesn't break apart. You're going to be using a lot of glue, and you're going to be cutting burlap sack strips so that you can dunk them in plaster of Paris, as well as in some paper, newspaper for paper mache, getting it wet and coating and creating a barrier around the bone so that the plaster of Paris doesn't stick to it and tear it up. So again, there's the picture out in the field for a big object, and then here's one that's much smaller that you would bring in, and the tools there that you would use. You don't use big heavy tools right around the bone. You always dig from the outside of the bone in towards it. What you want to do is isolate the bone to where it looks like it's by itself. And then if you're digging, have to dig down from the topsoil down into it, then you carefully take it down, all right, with tools that are not going to hurt the bone. So once you have it totally isolated, the bone itself, starting from the top down and then the side, and then the last step would be kind of leave it on a little pedestal, pull some of the dirt from underneath it a little bit, not all the way, because eventually you may have to put a strap or put a piece of lath or wood across the top to reinforce it, put something over the top of it to keep it from breaking apart as you move it. And sometimes that's good, and most of the time that's what you want to do, is preserve it as whole as possible to bring it into the lab. Well, once you've done that and you've reinforced it, you put a barrier first, like tinfoil. A lot of people use tinfoil over the surface of the bone, and then they apply sticks or whatever on that, and then they use plaster of Paris. But there's one thing that they do before they ever really put any of these on it. And that's once the bone is fairly clean, a lot of people will brush it off with a brush, like a paintbrush, and put a coat of PVA, polyvinyl acetate, or some similar coating, protective coating on the surface of it. Some people even use glue. As it cracks or something, they want to put glue in there to kind of help glue it together before they move it. Then when you transport it, you have to move it carefully, put it on something flat, a board that is flat, then have it ready to transport out on this board by not just yourself, but it usually takes two people, at least two people. And you carefully move it down to an area where you can transport it and bring it in. And again, transport becomes something little ticklish, you may want to put some cushion under your bone so that it is taking the shock as you're driving down the road or wherever it is. Once that you've brought it to the lab, you're ready to begin to restore it. And so I have in front of me here now some tools like dental picks, shish kebab stick, another kind of wood implement, brushes, and gloves and other kinds of brushes for cleaning things off and repairing them as you're working with the bone and trying to clean it up as best you can. You're going to have to do a lot of it in the lab when you bring it in. Only use a dental pick or things like that as you need to get into detailed areas and pick out hard pieces of clay or dirt or sand. So that's the cleaning, and then you can use a gentle wash or just use a brush and clean it as best you can, a little coarser brush, just again, nothing that'll scar the bone itself, and you begin to do that, all right, and rub the bone and clean it. And once you've done that, then you can repair it. I'll start out with this big bone. That is a mammoth hip. And if we look at it real carefully, we can kind of see the real bone, and then where we've been plastering over it, you can see where we've been using water putty, or a putty that hardens hard, and then we can carve it, and eventually we can stain it. This is a mammoth one, so it's big. And we've been restoring it. We've just gotten the joint, what they call the acetabulum joint here, where the hip bone, the top of your hip or in your leg come together, there's a joint there. That's the ball socket that it fits in. Well, what do we use? Durham's water putty is real good. It rock hard when it dries, and we can carve it, cut it, reshape it, whatever we need to, and stain it. And so we use those. And of course, then our tools are, here's a rasp and sanding things, electronic devices that we need to kind of shape that hard putty. Well, sometimes we have to go, and put pieces of bone together. As you can see, here's a piece that's going to go up here on this. So we've got to work that on there. And sometimes it's hard to do. But when you have smaller bones to work with, you can have what I call a little sandbox. And you can see I've got one here that is standing up, and I've glued it on there, and I don't want it to move or to fall off. So the sand holds it in place and keeps the bone in place until the glue hardens. And so the sandbox is really good for putting pottery, pots together, broken things together if you need to hold them in place for a period of time. Once you've done that, you're always in the processes. This takes so much time. You need to be looking and saying, what have I got? Have I got a mammoth bone? Like this? Big boy? Have I got a mastodon bone? Have I got a camel bone? And so you need to research those, or bison. You need to research those and find them out on the internet. You can do book pictures, you can go to museums. A lot of times museums in the area will also have examples. You say, that's what I have, and you can see it. Once you've done your research, you've done your restoring, and you're continuing to do this, you need to preserve it. You look at this bone here, and we'll kind of walk around it and look at it. And you can see it's only a part of a bone. And actually, this is a part of the upper arm bone of a mammoth. And this part we're seeing is where the elbow is. And if you look at the bone, you can see it's kind of shiny. And you notice a paintbrush next to it there. That is what we call the preservative, to keep it from drying out, the bone from drying out. And we use this preservative, and it's called polyvinyl acetate. And of course, we always need gloves and masks when we're dealing with chemicals and other things. We have to be careful and practice safety. But the PVA, polyvinyl acetate, is that little plastic container down there, and it's like pellets of plastic. And we mix it in with a certain amount of acetone that dissolves it, and we get the peanut butter looking jar there of a clear liquid. It's about, as thick as a little more than tea, but not much more. And then we can use the paintbrush, and we can paint it on there, and it coats it like a thin coat of plastic and helps to preserve the bone. Then the last part is, what are you going to do with your bone? Display it. And so we come to station number 4, which is planning your display. And you need to think, am I going to just leave it in a cabinet or show it in a cabinet and just need a label? Or am I going to use it as a show and tell, like a science fair project? Or take it to meetings somewhere, 4-H, various other places where you have to do something. You need to plan. And so these are some of the tools, a little more engineering-oriented tools you will need. And here you can see I'm working with mammoths and doing some wood burning. And I've been thinking about how do I want to display this. I've got colored cards back there and cut out cards to use for teaching tools or things like that. The T-square over there to make sure my cuts are square and straight. And by the way, when you work with knives, X-Acto knives or things like that, be sure you're careful because they are sharp and they do cut. But again, this is the planning, your display design, your engineering at this point. And let's go to what is now the final display. And so as I come around to this table here in this station, and I call it Station 5, this is the final display. I'll back up so you can see the whole display and what I engineered and designed. I started with a box at the bottom that was some kind of a tool. I sanded it off, made it nice. I fixed the inside to protect the bones, and you can see the two bones that we recently found here, a mammoth bone, which is a tibia bone, the lower leg, bigger bone of a mammoth. And I'll bring that up here, and you can see the picture of the mammoth right there. And you see the blue on the left there, the leg that I've colored, the blue part? Well, underneath it is yellow. That's the tibia bone, which is what this is down here, tibia bone. Now looking at the whole display, my focus now on this is the bone, and particularly elephant bones. So that's been my focus. And so I'm looking at elephants, and I have designed it to say, let's talk elephants. And so this topic then goes through and talks about elephants that live today and elephants that lived in the past. And I have a description of mammoths here, and then I have on the other side, the right side, description of a mastodon. Most people confuse the two. And so I wanted to kind of point this out, the difference between them. And so this, and I back up again here and look at the display, all right? And I then have my final product. Let's go around the corner here, and I've actually made this into a double display. Let's look at this backside of the finished product. And here I have it. I have elephant teeth and tusks, trunk of an elephant, feet of an elephant. Those are fascinating to me, and I wanted to compare mammoth teeth and mastodon teeth to modern teeth. And then I found it very fascinating about trunk growth, because we've got a tusk over here and tusk growth, and the trunk is fascinating with 40,000 muscles. And then we have the feet of an elephant. They're always walking on their tiptoes. This is amazing. So this is the other backside of this project. I've actually made it two-sided. But the thing I want to point out now is in this station number 6 is then you're dealing with your written record. It's always important to journal everything you do. Keep a record of it, date it. It becomes a document for you. In some cases, a very important document depending on the kind of find that you make or discovery that you make. And so it also will give you an idea on research ideas that you can keep a record of and make a note on them on the side to come back later and do a little more research on or study on. Now we move to the final phase, which then is publication of some kind. And basically, all this is sharing your information. If you make a good find and you make finds like this, it's always fun to share it with people. Here's one that came out in a newspaper here recently about our finding this mammoth bone. You want to be able to tell people what you found, how you accomplished it, what you learned from their project, and then of course again you're always looking for new ideas. Like for me, the teeth and the other things. And I also found something very interesting about war elephants in this that I never knew, but made perfect sense as I reviewed history documents and all about the use of Asian elephants and African elephants for war purposes. And so that was really intriguing to me and had a lot of enlightening information for me. So let's real quickly go through this again, the 7 steps. Number 1, we started out with our discovery. So as I move around here and look at all of these, number 1, we talked about our discovery. Now you can kind of remember this stuff, what we're doing, what we're using. And then we go to finer tools for discovery and what we need, sometimes for detail work. Then when we get it back in the lab, like this one, we can restore. There's putty and some of the tools we need. And if we have pieces that need to be put back together, a way to get them to stand so that they won't keep falling apart and the glue takes place and glues it together, is the little sandbox. Then once your bones are nice and clean, then you want to protect them from the moisture, from drying out and cracking. And there's the mix, PVA, acetone, and then the mix that we paint on. Again, emphasizing safety in all of this. Have the proper safety gear for anything you do. And then we move over again to the planning. Here you're designing, you're engineering a project. I didn't mention the wood burning tool there. I'm kind of working on something special for that. And then the next step is building the display with the goal of having a finished product. And here again we have the finished product. And finally we have your written record. You're keeping a written record, and then you want to share it with others. You're welcome to bring your bones here, and we can work with them here and work with you and teach you how to do it. I encourage you to do that. Hope to see you sometime. Come in, bring your bones, bring your stuff, and we'll teach you. And you can see all the things that we have here at the museum. Thank you for listening and watching. Again, I'm Jerry Simmons, Doc Rock, here at Heart of America Science Resource Center and Museum in Haviland, Kansas.